Howdy everyone, I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to be talking about 5 places on this earth that you probably don't want to visit, especially after dark. These aren't just spooky locations from some campfire tale or a horror movie. No, these are very real places with documented terrifying histories that continue to haunt them to this very day. We're going to be traveling all around the globe, from the silent radioactive streets of a Ukrainian ghost city to a cursed fort in India where even the government won't let you enter at night. So get comfortable, maybe turn down the lights and prepare yourself. We're about to count down the top 5 most chilling real-life horror stories from around the world. These are stories of tragedy, of mystery, and of events so disturbing that they've left a permanent scar on the landscape. The kind of places where the air feels heavy, where your every instinct screams at you to turn back, and where the silence is often more terrifying than any scream. Before we get into our number 5 spot, I just wanted to say that if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, so please consider hitting that like button. It's the number 1 way you can show your support for this channel, and it really does make a huge difference. Alright, enough of that. Let's get into our first story. Our first story takes us to a place in West Virginia, a massive, Gothic-style building that looms over the landscape like some kind of stone monster. It's called the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And from the moment you see it, you get this feeling in your gut that something is deeply wrong here. The building itself is the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in all of North America, a testament to a time when people thought that grand, beautiful architecture could somehow heal the most fractured minds. But the beauty of its exterior hides a history that is anything but. When this asylum first opened its doors back in the mid-1800s, it was designed to be a sanctuary. It was supposed to hold about 250 patients, giving them space, fresh air, and what was then considered compassionate care. But as the years went on, things started to go horribly, horribly wrong. By the 1950s, this place, designed for a couple hundred people, was crammed with over 2,400 souls. The overcrowding was unimaginable. People were living in conditions that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. It was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a warehouse for the forgotten. Imagine being a patient there. You're confused, maybe scared, and you're put into this building with 10 times the number of people it was meant for. The hallways are overflowing, the rooms are packed, and there's no privacy, no peace, just the constant noise and chaos of thousands of suffering people all trapped together. The staff, completely overwhelmed and underfunded, couldn't possibly provide any real care. They were just trying to maintain control, and often their methods were brutal. This is where the story takes a much darker turn. To deal with the sheer number of patients and the severity of their conditions, doctors at the asylum turned to some of the most barbaric treatments in the history of medicine. We're talking about electroshock therapy, often administered without any anesthesia. Patients would be strapped down, and a powerful electric current would be sent surging through their brain, causing violent seizures. The idea was to reset the brain, but the reality was often memory loss, broken bones from the convulsions, and profound psychological trauma. And then there was the ice pick lobotomy. It sounds like something from a medieval torture chamber, but it was a real medical procedure performed right here. A doctor named Walter Freeman was famous for it. He would use an instrument that was essentially a reinforced ice pick inserted through the patient's eye socket and wiggle it around to sever the connections in the brain's frontal lobe. He performed hundreds of these procedures at the asylum, sometimes in a matter of minutes. The goal was to make patients more docile, but it often left them in a vegetative state, their personalities and souls completely erased. The patients, who weren't subjected to these horrifying procedures, still had to endure the daily nightmare of life in the asylum. They were often locked in cages, chained to walls, or left in isolation for days on end. The sanitation was non-existent. Disease ran rampant. The sheer despair and hopelessness of the place were suffocating. It's no wonder that suicides were tragically common. People would find any way they could to escape the living hell they were trapped in. They would hang themselves, jump from windows, or simply give up and waste away. The asylum was a pressure cooker of human misery. Every wall, every floorboard seemed to absorb the pain and anguish of the thousands of people who suffered within it. When you walk through its empty halls today, you can almost feel it. The air is cold, even on a warm day. You hear whispers in empty rooms, doors slam shut on their own. People who visit have reported seeing full-bodied apparitions of nurses in old-fashioned uniforms or shadowy figures of patients darting down the long, decaying corridors. One of the most famous spirits said to haunt the asylum is a little girl named Lily. She was supposedly a patient here, though records are spotty. Visitors often bring toys and balls to her room, and sometimes they'll hear the faint sound of a child's laughter, or see a small ball roll across the floor on its own, as if an unseen hand has pushed it. It's a sad, gentle haunting compared to some of the others, a reminder that children were also caught in this web of suffering. Other areas are not so gentle. The ward where the most violent patients were kept is said to be home to a much more malevolent energy. People report being pushed, scratched, or having their hair pulled by an unseen force. They feel a sense of pure dread and aggression, as if the rage of the tormented souls who lived there has been permanently imprinted on the very fabric of the building. It's a place where you constantly feel like you're being watched, judged by the countless eyes of those who never left. The asylum finally closed its doors in 1994, after over a century of operation. But the stories, the pain, and the spirits remain. It stands today not as a monument to healing, but as a terrifying reminder of a dark chapter in our history. It's a place where thousands of people lived and died in unimaginable conditions, and it seems that many of them are still there, trapped in a cycle of suffering, forever haunting the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So if you ever find yourself in Western West Virginia, and you feel a strange pull towards that massive stone building on the hill, just remember the stories. Remember the 2,400 souls packed inside, the ice picks, the cages, and the despair. Because when you step inside those doors, you're not just entering a historic building, you're stepping into a place where the line between the living and the dead has become terrifyingly thin. For our next story, we travel across the Atlantic to the beautiful, historic city of Venice, Italy. But we're not going to the famous canals or St. Mark's Square. No, we're going to a small, unassuming island just a short boat ride away, an island that most locals refuse to even look at, let alone set foot on. It's called Poveglia Island, and its serene appearance from a distance hides a history so dark and gruesome that it's often called one of the most haunted places on Earth. Poveglia's horrifying story begins centuries ago, during the darkest days of the bubonic plague. When the Black Death swept through Europe, Venice, as a major port city, was hit incredibly hard. Desperate to stop the spread of the disease, the Venetian authorities came up with a grim solution. They designated Poveglia as a quarantine station, a place where anyone showing even the slightest symptom of the plague would be sent to live out their final agonizing days. Imagine the terror. You have a fever, a cough. The next thing you know, you're being torn from your family, put on a boat, and shipped to this isolated island. You know it's a death sentence. Poveglia became a dumping ground for the sick and dying. Tens of thousands of people, men, women, and children, were exiled there. The island was littered with bodies, and when they ran out of space to bury them, they simply threw them into massive pits and burned them. It's said that over 160,000 people died on this tiny patch of land. The sheer scale of the death and suffering is almost impossible to comprehend. The soil on Poveglia is rumored to be composed of over 50% human ash and bone. Fishermen in the area have long avoided the waters around the island, not just out of superstition, but because they would frequently pull up human bones in their nets. The island itself became a giant open-air grave, saturated with the pain and despair of those who perished there. It was a place synonymous with death. As if that history wasn't horrifying enough, Poveglia's story gets even worse in the 20th century. In 1922, a mental hospital was built on the island. Can you imagine a more inappropriate place to try and heal the mentally ill? They built this asylum directly on top of the mass graves of plague victims. The patients who were sent there immediately began reporting that they were seeing the ghosts of plague victims and hearing constant, agonizing whispers and screams. Of course, their claims were dismissed by the doctors as just another symptom of their madness. But the staff also started to experience strange and terrifying things. They would hear disembodied voices echoing through the halls and see dark, fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision. The atmosphere of the place was one of constant, oppressive dread. The island's dark past seemed to be bleeding into its present, tormenting both the patients and their caretakers. The asylum was run by a doctor who was, by all accounts, a truly evil man. He was fascinated by the idea of the lobotomy and used his patients as guinea pigs for his cruel experiments. He would take them to the hospital's bell tower, a place that offered a beautiful view of the lagoon but was the site of unspeakable horrors. There he would perform brutal, unsanctioned surgeries on them, using crude tools like hammers, chisels, and hand drills, all without anesthesia. The doctor believed that by torturing his patients, he could somehow cure them. But his experiments only led to more death and suffering. The screams of his victims would echo from the bell tower across the island, but there was no one to help them. They were completely isolated, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The doctor's reign of terror continued for years, adding a new, more malicious layer of horror to Poveglia's already tragic story. The legend goes that the doctor himself was eventually driven mad by the spirits of the island. He began to be tormented by the ghosts of the plague victims and the patients he had tortured. They haunted his waking moments and his dreams, until one day he couldn't take it anymore. He climbed to the top of the very same bell tower where he had committed his atrocities and threw himself off. But the story doesn't end there. A nurse who supposedly witnessed the event claimed that as the doctor fell, a thick, dark mist swirled up from the ground and enveloped him, choking the life out of him before he even hit the ground. It was as if the island itself, the very soil saturated with death, had risen up to claim its tormentor. His body was then bricked up within the walls of the bell tower, where some say his tormented spirit remains to this day. The asylum was finally closed in 1968, and since then, Poveglia has been completely abandoned. The Italian government has forbidden anyone from visiting, and the locals want nothing to do with it. They call it the Island of No Return. They believe it is a cursed place, a portal to hell, haunted by the thousands of tortured souls who are trapped there. Those who have dared to sneak onto the island report an overwhelming feeling of sadness and evil, hearing screams and seeing apparitions that are so terrifying they flee in absolute panic. It remains there, silent and waiting, a beautiful island with the ugliest of secrets. For our third destination, we journey to the state of Rajasthan in India, to the ruins of what was once a prosperous and bustling town. Nestled at the foot of a mountain range, the Bangar Fort stands in a state of eerie decay. During the day, it attracts tourists who come to marvel at its crumbling temples, palaces, and marketplaces. But as the sun begins to set, a strange transformation occurs. A deep, unsettling silence falls over the ruins, and everyone, from tourists to locals, quickly leaves. Because after sunset, Bangar Fort is officially off limits. There's a sign placed by the Archaeological Survey of India, the official government body, right at the entrance. It explicitly states in Hindi and English that entering the borders of Bangar before sunrise and after sunset is strictly prohibited. This isn't just a suggestion or a local superstition. It's a government-enforced rule. Think about that for a moment. What could possibly be so terrifying about this place that a national government agency has to legally forbid people from going there at night? The answer lies in a powerful curse that was cast centuries ago. There are a couple of legends about how the fort came to be cursed, but the most popular one involves a beautiful princess named Ratnavati and a powerful sorcerer, or tantric, named Singya. The princess was renowned for her incredible beauty, and suitors from all over the kingdom sought her hand. The sorcerer, Singya, was also completely captivated by her, but he knew that he, a practitioner of the dark arts, stood no chance of winning her affection through normal means. So he decided to use his magic to trap her. One day, the sorcerer saw the princess's maid buying a special perfume, or ittar, for her in the village market. Seeing his opportunity, Singya used his black magic to cast a spell on the perfume. The idea was that as soon as the princess touched the scented oil, she would become helplessly enchanted and would be compelled to run into his arms. He had concocted a love potion, but one born from dark obsession, not genuine affection. His plan was sinister and selfish, and it would have devastating consequences. However, Princess Ratnavati was not just beautiful, she was also intelligent, and had some knowledge of the magical arts herself. As the maid presented her with the perfume, the princess immediately sensed that something was wrong with it. She saw through the sorcerer's wicked plan. In a moment of defiance, instead of using the perfume, she threw the bottle onto a large nearby boulder. The moment the enchanted oil struck the stone, the sorcerer's spell was activated, but not in the way he intended. The spell, meant to draw the princess to him, instead caused the massive boulder to be drawn to him. The rock dislodged and began rolling straight towards the sorcerer. As the boulder thundered down upon him, crushing him to death, Singya used his final dying breath to lay a powerful curse upon the entire city of Bangar. He cursed that the fort and everyone in it would be destroyed, and that their souls would be trapped within its walls for eternity, never to find peace or be reborn. Shortly after the sorcerer's death, his curse came to pass. A brutal war broke out between Bangar and the nearby kingdom of Ajabgarh. The city was invaded, and a terrible battle ensued within its walls. The entire population, including the beautiful Princess Ratnavati, was massacred. The once thriving city was reduced to ruins overnight, completely abandoned and left to the mercy of the jungle and the sorcerer's eternal curse. Ever since that fateful day, Bangar has been considered a place of immense paranormal activity. The locals who live in the new village that has sprung up outside the fort's boundaries have countless stories. They speak of hearing strange sounds at night, the clashing of swords, the screams of women and children, the tinkling of anklets from phantom dancers in the ruined palaces, and eerie, disembodied music floating on the wind. It's as if the tragic final moments of the city are replaying over and over again. People who have dared to defy the government warning and stay in the fort after dark have either vanished without a trace or have come back so traumatized that they are unable to speak of what they experienced. The few who have shared their stories talk about a profound sense of sadness and dread that permeates the air. They report seeing shadowy figures moving through the ruins, being followed by unseen entities, and hearing voices whispering their names from the darkness. The government takes these reports so seriously that not only do they ban entry at night, but the local villagers have built their homes without roofs. There's a local belief that if they build a roof on their house, it will mysteriously collapse. They believe this is a part of the sorcerer's curse, a constant reminder of his power and the tragedy that befell the original inhabitants of Bangar. They live in constant fear and respect of the spirits that are said to roam the fort. So while Bangar Fort is a beautiful historical site by day, it holds a dark and terrifying secret. It's a place where a curse born from obsession led to the destruction of a city and the eternal damnation of its people. The government's warning sign is not just a formality, it's a genuine plea to stay away, to respect the dead, and to not become the next victim of the curse of Bangar Fort. Our penultimate story takes us to Japan, to a place of haunting, quiet beauty at the northwest base of the iconic Mount Fuji. It's a forest called Aokigahara. Spanning about 13.5 square miles, it's a vast, dense, and unnervingly silent place. The trees grow so tightly together, their leaves forming such a thick canopy that they block out almost all sunlight and wind. When you step inside, it feels like the entire world just goes quiet. But this silence is not peaceful. It is heavy, sorrowful, and deeply, deeply unsettling. This forest is known by another, much more infamous name, the Suicide Forest. For decades, Aokigahara has been one of the world's most used suicide locations. The reasons why are complex and debated, perhaps linked to a 1961 novel that romanticized suicide in the forest, or perhaps tied to older legends of ubasut, the grim practice of carrying an elderly or infirm relative to a remote place and leaving them to die. Whatever the reason, the result is tragic and horrifying. Every year, volunteers and police conduct annual sweeps of the forest to search for and recover bodies. They find dozens. The number is so high that the local government has stopped publicizing the exact figures to avoid encouraging more people to come here for the same tragic purpose. All throughout the forest, you can find signs posted by prevention groups with messages like, "Your life is a precious gift from your parents, and please consult the police before you decide to die." They are desperate pleas in a place that seems to have an irresistible pull for those in despair. Walking through Aokigahara is a surreal and profoundly disturbing experience. The forest floor is a tangled mess of roots and moss-covered volcanic rock. It's incredibly easy to get lost. And to make matters worse, the forest grows on top of hardened lava from an eruption of Mount Fuji centuries ago. The soil is rich in magnetic iron, which is said to interfere with compasses, GPS devices, and even cell phone service. So if you wander off the path, you are truly terrifyingly on your own. As you walk, you can't escape the evidence of the forest's grim reputation. You'll see personal belongings left behind, a single shoe, a tattered backpack, a faded photograph. Deeper in, you might find more overt signs. Colored ribbons or tape are often tied to trees, left by people who were having second thoughts. a way for them to find their way back out if they change their minds. But often these ribbons lead to a much more grim discovery. They are trails that lead to the final resting places of those who did not turn back. The forest is believed to be haunted by the spirits of those who have died there. These spirits are known as yurei, the Japanese equivalent of ghosts, and they are said to be filled with anger and sadness, trapped in the place where they took their own lives. Visitors and patrol teams have reported hearing blood-curdling, disembodied screams echoing through the silent trees. They speak of seeing white, spectral figures flitting between the trunks and feeling an overwhelming sense of sorrow that seems to seep out of the very ground. There's a palpable feeling of being watched. Many who enter the forest, even those who are just there to hike, report feeling a sudden, inexplicable wave of depression wash over them. They feel a powerful, persuasive urge to leave the path and walk deeper into the woods, an almost magnetic pull towards the darkest parts of the forest. It's as if the collective despair of all who have died there has created a malevolent consciousness, an entity that wants to lure more souls into its grasp. The volunteers who have to perform the grim task of recovering the bodies have their own chilling rituals. When they find a body, they will often play junkin, rock, paper, scissors, to decide who has to sleep in the room with the body overnight at the local forest station. They believe that if the body is left alone, the yurei will become agitated and its spirit will scream throughout the night. It's a superstition born from years of dealing with the unimaginable horrors found within the sea of trees. The forest's reputation is so ingrained in Japanese culture that it's treated with a mixture of fear and reverence. It's a place of immense natural beauty that has been irrevocably tainted by human tragedy. The silence within Aokigahara is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of something else. It's the weight of countless sorrows, a quiet testament to the final, lonely moments of thousands of lives. It is a place where nature's beauty and humanity's darkest despair collide. The twisting trees seem to writhe in agony, and the deep silence feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the next lost soul to wander in. Aokigahara is not just a forest. It's a purgatory on earth, a place where the veil between our world and the next is frighteningly thin, and the whispers of the dead are carried on a wind that never seems to blow. So if you ever find yourself at the base of Mount Fuji, looking at the entrance to this dense, dark wood, remember what lies within. It's a place where compasses fail and hope dies. A beautiful, tragic labyrinth that is all too easy to enter, but for so many, impossible to leave. The sea of trees waits, silent and hungry. We have arrived at our number one spot, a place that is arguably the most unsettling man-made location on the entire planet. This isn't a story about ghosts or curses in the traditional sense, but about a real, invisible monster that has rendered an entire city uninhabitable for thousands of years. We are going to the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone in northern Ukraine, to the ghost city of Pripyat. What happened here was not a slow decay or a single act of violence, but a sudden, catastrophic event that froze a city of 50,000 people in time. On April 26, 1986, during a late-night safety test, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant went critical. A series of explosions blew the 2,000-ton lid off the reactor, releasing a plume of highly radioactive material into the atmosphere. This cloud of poison was 400 times more potent than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It drifted across Ukraine, Belarus, and much of Europe, contaminating everything in its path. But the area immediately surrounding the plant was ground zero. The nearby city of Pripyat was built specifically for the plant's workers and their families. It was a model Soviet city, modern, clean, with schools, hospitals, a swimming pool, and even an amusement park that was scheduled to open just a few days after the disaster. The residents had no idea what had happened. They saw the fire at the plant, some even gathered on a bridge, now known as the Bridge of Death, to watch, completely unaware that they were being showered with a fatal dose of radiation. The Soviet government, in a catastrophic failure of responsibility, tried to cover up the accident. For 36 hours, the people of Pripyat went about their lives. Kids went to school, people went to work, weddings took place, all while breathing in deadly radioactive particles. Finally, on the afternoon of April 27th, buses rolled into the city and a frantic announcement was made over loudspeakers. Everyone had to evacuate immediately. They were told it was temporary, just for 3 days, and to only bring essential documents and a small amount of food. They were told to leave everything else behind. They never came back. The city of Pripyat was abandoned in a matter of hours, and it has remained that way ever since. It is a perfect, haunting time capsule of the Soviet Union in 1986. When you walk through its silent streets today, it's like stepping into a post-apocalyptic movie, only this is all terrifyingly real. Apartment buildings stand empty, their windows like vacant eyes. Inside, family photos still hang on the walls, beds are unmade, and tables are set for meals that were never eaten. The most iconic and heart-wrenching sights are in the places meant for children. In a kindergarten, tiny gas masks litter the floor, a grim reminder of the failed attempts to protect the most vulnerable. Dolls are scattered everywhere, a one-eyed doll staring up from a dusty cot, another sitting alone on a windowsill, its plastic face streaked with grime. These toys, once objects of love and play, have become horrifying symbols of a stolen childhood and a city poisoned forever. The silence is the most profound thing about Pripyat. There are no cars, no voices, no sounds of life. The only thing you hear is the crunch of broken glass under your feet and the mournful whistle of the wind blowing through shattered window panes. And of course, the constant, unnerving crackle of your Geiger counter, a device that measures radiation levels. It's a constant, audible reminder of the invisible enemy that surrounds you, that has seeped into the soil, the concrete, and the very air you breathe. The infamous amusement park is perhaps the most surreal location. The Ferris wheel, which never carried a single paying customer, stands as a skeletal silhouette against the grey Ukrainian sky, a monument to a future that never was. The bumper cars sit rusting in their enclosure, covered in leaves and dirt, waiting for laughter that will never come. It is a playground of ghosts, a place of joy that has been transformed into a symbol of ultimate tragedy. While the story of Chernobyl isn't a ghost story in the paranormal sense, many who visit the zone report an overwhelming sense of dread and of being watched. They feel the presence of the 50,000 people who were ripped from their lives. Some have reported hearing the phantom laughter of children near the amusement park, or seeing shadowy figures in the windows of the abandoned hospital, a place where the first firefighters and plant workers, the heroes who fought the blaze, died horrific deaths from acute radiation syndrome. Nature has begun to reclaim the city. Trees grow through the floors of buildings, and wild animals, including wolves, boar, and wild horses, roam the empty streets. It's a strange and paradoxical sight, life in its most wild form, thriving in a place that is deadly to humans. But this is not a sign of healing. The animals, the plants, the soil, they are all still highly radioactive. The monster is still here. It's just quiet now. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone is a terrifying monument to human error and hubris. It's a city frozen at the exact moment of its death, a place where the remnants of ordinary life have become artifacts in a radioactive museum. It is the #1 most chilling real-life horror story, because the monster is real, it's invisible, and it will be there for the next 20,000 years. A permanent warning to the world of what can happen when we fail to respect the terrifying power we have unleashed. And there you have it. 5 of the most chilling real-life horror stories from around the globe. From the tortured souls of an American asylum to the radioactive silence of a Ukrainian ghost city, these places serve as terrifying reminders that the scariest stories are often the ones that are true. The world is full of strange, dark, and mysterious places, each with a story to tell. And we've only just scratched the surface. The echoes of the past are all around us. We just have to be willing to listen. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I truly hope you found these stories as unsettling and fascinating as I did. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark corners of our world, please consider showing your support by hitting that like button. And more importantly, if you want to make sure you don't miss our next exploration of the strange, dark, and mysterious, please subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. It's the best way to become part of our community. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been to any of these places? Do you know of another location with a terrifying true story that you think we should cover? Your suggestions and stories are what make this channel so special. So please, share them with us. Until next time, stay safe, be aware of the stories the world is trying to tell you, and thank you for watching.